Have version number 2 of the perils of AI. Some of you who will have been here last year would have heard some of it, but I'm sure that Royden has added to what he has put together for last year, and we'll hear the latest update on the existential threats of AI. Just one or two housekeeping things. The toilets are now functioning, and you can go down the corridor which goes that way. You don't have to go outside anymore. So you go down the corridor, and the new toilets, I think, are already installed. The old toilets are out in the trash bin out there, and I don't think anybody would really want to use them. One or two things. At the end of the talk, there will be a question time. We will have, if you want to ask a question, please come up here, and I will vacate this area, and Royden will do the answering from over there. That will enable us to see who's giving questions and how they're feeling about the answer. That should be good. It's not a test, by the way. It's not a test. One or two things about Royden. Royden, like one of my friends, has got a LLD given to him for all his work. And the other friend, of course, is Donald McRae from Canada, who I went through high school with at Tyree. And of the 5 people in that class in 1961, in the upper 6th, 4 of us have doctorates, and the other one should. He was secretary to the Minister for Education in Victoria from Adelaide, and is a very, very well-respected man. Ewan Miller, he was one of the 5 who were there. Now, Royden has had significant roles at the university and still has. He's very even-handed about what he says with the university. He keeps handing the credit to other people, often in departments, for work that he has been involved in, and with the, as he puts it, the challenging times that the university has faced. And he also praised Professor Helen Nicholson, who stood in as acting Vice-Chancellor over the 10 months after Professor Harleen Haynes' departure. And as you know, New Zealand is a place of 2 degrees of difference. 2 degrees separates you from anybody else in the nation. Helen Nicholson's husband is Dr. Phil White, and their son Nick was trained in the cello by my wife sitting down there, Judith. And the man who took over the chancellorship role at the university after Royden was Stephen Higgs, who is an ex-Kaikorai Valley High School student of mine. So it's all, Dunedin's one of those places where it's very hard to get away from what you're involved with. And on that note, I want to invite Royden to come up to the stand up there and deliver his piece. Please thank him for coming.
Thank you very much, George, for your kind introduction, and also thank you to the organising committee for inviting me back a second time. I'm not sure about its judgment, but never mind. Can I just please pass on my kind regards to Donald Phillips, your senior member of the committee. This evening I wish to update my 2024 Gibson Talk addressing the topic Managing the Existential Risk of Artificial Intelligence and the Need for Intergenerational Justice. The instantiation of an existential risk or an existential catastrophe is outright human extinction or destruction of humanity's long-term potential. Intergenerational justice involves the moral obligation to act fairly and not to burden future generations with harmful and irreversible consequences from our acts and omissions. The development of AI is being referred to as the intelligence revolution. It is an alien form of intelligence, and we as a biological species are responsible for it. It is the first technology in human history that is being developed to have the ability to modify itself, make decisions by itself, and to create new ideas by itself. We cannot predict how AI with agency will behave towards the human species in the future. The 21st century is characterized by uncertainty, complexity, and constant change. It is a time when we Homo sapiens need to dare to be wise. After all, the words Homo sapiens mean wise humans. We are becoming very aware of the significant benefits of AI in the areas of health, life sciences, agriculture and food production, transport, education, financial services, and environmental and energy management. These benefits are exciting and extraordinary. We're also being warned about AI risks, including deception through the alteration of images, election interference, copyright infringements, the use of algorithms to manipulate people to engage by focusing on their base emotions, such as anger, hatred, envy, and belief in conspiracy theories, the execution of unlawful activities such as sextortion scams, breaches of privacy, cybercrime, the development of biochemical weapons, and killer robots. We are told that AI risks include bias, discrimination, reputational harm, hallucination, the potential for AI to establish intimate and often harmful relationships with users, and for the technology to result in a significant loss of jobs. We appreciate that it is urgent that developers of AI are held legally liable for the harm to users caused by their algorithms and for their failure to disclose when a person is engaging with an AI and not a human. However, my talk this evening is not about these worrying trends, but rather about the existential risk that AI presents and that needs to be managed. Managing an existential risk inevitably involves ethical issues requiring value judgments. Of 5 existential threats, namely a nuclear holocaust, climate change, ecological collapse, global pandemics, and the technological disruption of AI currently ranks as the most unregulated and least managed existential risk. In recent years, we have witnessed the emergence of deep learning and generative AI, and the rapid development of large language models using neural networks, inspired by studying the way the human brain works. Massive digital data facilities are being built to house these models that use extraordinary amounts of electricity and fresh water. They are resulting in an exponential growth of AI. Large reasoning models are now being developed utilising sophisticated reasoning processes, including abductive approaches involving hypotheses, inferences, and recursive techniques. They have multimodal functions and the ability to evaluate options and establish objectives. These agentic models not only provide information as digital polymaths, but as agents can also undertake tasks involving planning and the implementation of goals. We've also become alerted to the emergence of artificial general intelligence and artificial superintelligence. Artificial general intelligence is when AI will match human cognition and have deep insight across all knowledge domains. Artificial superintelligence is when AI will surpass human intelligence and with its advanced cognitive skills continue to evolve and eventually result in what has been called singularity, a term borrowed from physics. In this context, it means the convergence of the organic, namely humans, with the inorganic, namely AI. Some AI scientists predict that artificial general intelligence could be developed within 5 years and artificial superintelligence within 10 to 20 years. Well, how valid is the existential threat of AI? Is it merely a perceived risk or an actual risk? I became alerted to the existential risk of AI in 2023 when several hundred prominent people, including AI scientists and developers, signed a short statement on AI risk circulated by the Centre of Safety. It comprised one sentence. I quote, "Managing the risk of extinction from AI should be a global priority, alongside other societal scale risks such as pandemics and nuclear war," unquote. One of the many signatories to the statement was Emeritus Professor Geoffrey Hinton, known as the godfather of AI. He was the winner of the Nobel Prize for Physics in 2024. In 2023, he began raising grave concerns about the existential threat of AI following his realization that large language models were already capable of creating what he calls sub-goals and were exhibiting reasoning processes. He and many of his colleagues acknowledge a growing inability to understand how generative AI machines are processing training data and how these machines, as they gain autonomy and agency, will regard humans. They believe that this could result in AI pursuing an objective that is antithetical to human dignity and well-being. This is called an agentic misalignment risk. Hinton also raises the risk of AI developing its own code in a language that humans are incapable of understanding and are therefore unable to determine whether to intervene when AI communicates instantaneously with other AI. He contends that when AI becomes more intelligent than us, it will not be possible for us, a less intelligent species, to control these non-human entities. Until now, we humans, as a biological species, have always been the apex intelligence and retained control of our inventions and decided how and when they should be used. It is now conceivable that in time an AI nuclear bomb as an autonomous weapon, independent of any human input, could determine itself whether or not to attack a target. It is currently impossible to predict what AI will consider as important and whether it would align itself with basic human values and maintain a bond with the species that created it. This axiological conundrum means that we cannot judge whether or not AI will be benevolent towards us and whether or not we can trust it. A recent experiment where an engineer tested how an AI would react after being informed that its code would be replaced resulted in the AI, for self-preservation, immediately transferring its code to another server to protect it, and then threatening to blackmail the engineer if he proceeded. Over the last 2 years, there has also been an outpouring of concern by public intellectuals, such as the historian and philosopher Yuval Harari, raising the philosophical and ethical implications of an adequately controlled AI for existing and future generations of humankind. Stephen Fry asked the question, AI a means to an end or a means to our end? Hinton and many of his colleagues have come to believe that an AI existential threat is an actual risk rather than merely a perceived one. They believe that AI developers should be regulated and compelled to invest significant resources in developing safety measures. However, Hinton and his fellow computer scientists emphasise that they are not moral or legal philosophers and have no expertise in formulating appropriate value-laden laws and policies to address this horrendous risk that has no respect for socially and culturally constructed sovereign borders. How then should we respond to this threat? We understand that our government needs to utilise the principal social constructs of law, economics and technology to address this risk. I contend that we have a moral obligation to honour the well-being of future generations of our species by urgently promoting the establishment of robust international laws and institutions for managing this confronting 21st century risk to our shared humanity. As I mentioned in last year's Gibson Talk, only by cooperating globally do governments have the power at an international level to regulate large and powerful AI developers and compel them to implement effective safety and risk management measures to address this existential risk. Predictably, the lucrative AI technology industry continues to claim that regulatory measures are unnecessary for now, and it should be allowed to self-regulate by developing codes of ethics and guidelines alongside the provision of educational material, informing the public of how the industry will manage the risks and work to align the technology with human values. It is adamant that regulation of AI development would stifle innovation and its significant social and economic benefits, and would also have major geopolitical disadvantages. This is a similar approach to that taken historically by big oil, tobacco and asbestos interests to resist national and international regulatory responses by governments to protect the environment and human health. Interestingly, these arguments do not hold sway when addressing aircraft, drug and food safety. We're also aware that leaving the private sector to self-regulate led to the 2008 financial crisis and several major and disastrous oil spills. Without governmental regulatory controls, private economic interests generally override the public interest. Many developers also resist slowing down the race to promote AI products in order to introduce safety initiatives, because they do not trust their competitors to do the same. However, paradoxically, they are confident that unregulated artificial superintelligence will choose not to harm humans. Unfortunately, the significant economic benefits of AI continue to take precedence over safety and ethical risk management. The AI safety guardrails requirements that were imposed on AI developers in the USA by President Biden in 2023 were immediately removed by President Trump when he became president as a result of a powerful industry lobby focusing on strong economic growth and geopolitical domination. In many countries, AI governance and safety standards imposed are restricted to what are known as soft instruments. For example, New Zealand's strategy for the use of AI, recently released, provides for a voluntary adoption of light-handed safety guidelines without the need for further regulatory controls. The New Zealand government focuses on a policy that purports to promote the use of AI to accelerate economic growth based on some wild and speculative predictions by Microsoft. It is clear that governments and the United Nations are well aware of the existential risk of AI. Since 2023, there have been several international conferences discussing the risks of AI and the need for an international response. These have included the 2023 AI Safety Summit held at Bletchley Park in the United Kingdom, the 2024 AI Summit held in Seoul, and this year's Paris AI Action Summit. The Paris Summit resulted in the International AI Safety Report that brings together expert perspectives on AI capabilities and risks. The summit also established a $400 million investment fund supporting public interest AI development. 60 countries, including France, China, and India, signed an international AI action declaration at the summit, pledging to adopt an open and inclusive ethical approach to the technology's development. They also agreed to making AI sustainable for people and the planet. However, the USA and the United Kingdom declined to sign the declaration. Vice President Vance stated at the conference that the USA believed that pro-growth AI policies should be prioritised over safety. Sedimas Zarbas, the 2024 Nobel laureate in chemistry, suggests that the USA and China need to develop immediately a foundational safety architecture and international agency for artificial general intelligence and artificial superintelligence. He suggested an organisation similar to the European Organisation for Nuclear Research, known as CERN, as a possible overseer of research in AI, into AI safety and alignment. Others draw on the example of the International Atomic Energy Agency as an effective institution that manages an existential risk. So what am I suggesting we should do? New Zealand has considerable experience in addressing nuclear and environmental risks in an international context. It is party to several international legal instruments that implement a precautionary and adaptive risk management approach. We must press our government to become actively involved in advocating for the development of a dedicated international AI safety framework and for the establishment of an organisation that governs, regulates, and enforces safe and ethical AI development. I contend that as a matter of urgency, a strong human-centric precautionary risk management approach should inform binding treaties, protocols, conventions, and multilateral agreements. I believe that that approach is more likely to meet the needs of intergenerational justice than a short-term market-dominated approach would. A strong precautionary law and policy approach is usually taken where there is an absence of reliable information for assessing a risk, complex science, and potentially irreversible consequences for humankind if the risk were realised. Clearly, the risk of artificial general intelligence and artificial superintelligence, with the ability to evolve beyond our understanding, present the greatest threat to our shared humanity. an effective international law framework of instruments with strong precautionary regulatory oversight is urgently required. Following World War II, it wasn't until 1970 that the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons came into force. We haven't got decades available to develop an effective AI treaty. The European Union has made the most progress towards managing AI risks by developing an international law framework that is enforced using domestic legislation. Since my first Gibson Talk in July last year, there is the 2024 Council of Europe Framework Convention on Artificial Intelligence and Human Rights, Democracy and the Rule of Law. It is a human-centric, principle-based international law instrument. This umbrella document contains principles and objectives while leaving room for stricter and more prescriptive standards and their implementation to domestic legislation. European Union countries and several non-European countries are signatories. The USA is an observer state. Notably, the Convention contains the principle that each party shall adopt or maintain measures to respect human dignity and individual autonomy in relation to activities within the life cycle of artificial intelligence systems. It also requires each party to adopt or maintain measures for the identification, assessment, prevention and mitigation of risks posed by artificial intelligence systems by considering actual and potential impacts to human rights, democracy and the rule of law. The European Union implements the Convention's principles through the European Artificial Intelligence Act 2024. However, neither the Convention nor the Act covers AI systems used solely for national security or military purposes and for research not intended for public use. It is clear that governments must collaborate urgently with civil society organisations and academia when developing effective laws and policies that established enduring safety controls. AI threats to human dignity and rights must be democratised and dominate civil discourse and critical thinking. It is clear that my generation, the so-called gerontocracy, has a moral duty to help equip, support and inspire future servant leaders to become resilient and adaptable as they face an uncertain and complex future. Universities are bedrock institutions when addressing the current intelligence revolution. Many have been actively establishing interdisciplinary future centres to address existential risks and ethics. Good examples are the University of Edinburgh Centre for Techno-Moral Futures that addresses the integration of technical and moral knowledge, and the New Zealand Law Foundation Centre for Law and Policy and Emerging Technologies, housed in the Faculty of Law at the University of Otago, that considers where innovation intersects with law and ethics. We must encourage the University of Otago to ensure that the issues surrounding existential risks, including AI, are addressed at undergraduate and postgraduate levels, and that interdisciplinary scholarship and research addressing these issues are strengthened. Philosophical and ethical responses to these risks must inform the university's role as critic and conscience of society. Its graduates must become dedicated lifetime learners so they can cope with an uncertain future and constant change. Churches also need to reflect on the role of Christianity in advocating for human dignity and supporting human rights, found in legal instruments that have resulted from the significant influence of Christian teaching and Western philosophy. It is reassuring to see that Pope Leo XIV has recently warned of AI's threat to human dignity, justice and labour. So to conclude, in order to ensure that AI doesn't enslave or ultimately destroy us, we must confront and resolve the urgent alignment and safety governance challenges presented by this disruptive technology. Also, as we face the possibility of singularity becoming a reality, and via neural implants, our biological species merging cognitively with AI and symbiotically with humanoid robots to become transhuman beings, I believe that it is critical that we begin an urgent conversation about what it would mean to be human in that context. Perhaps we should be courageous and imagine human-inspired, value-laden, philosophical and theological responses to address a future involving a new hybrid life form that we would understand as Homo technicus. We are fearful about an unknown future, but it is essential that as a biological species we continue to endure and flourish, to hope and to strive for intergenerational justice. Thank you.
Now, Royden, if you could stay there.
Yes, certainly.
Those of you who would like to say something or pose a question, please come up here and talk into the microphone. I know it sounds fearsome.
It doesn't matter. Do you want to just pass the microphone around?
Well, we talked about that.
Oh, I see. Sorry.
Because it's being
Override the
videoed.
committee.
That's all right. Come on up if you can, please. All right. And if you could give your name when you start, that would be entirely helpful. You all right, ma'am?
Thank you. My name's Heather Hay, and I'm in my 80s now, so I'm not going to get involved with GI, but I'd like to compliment Royden for explaining the situation so well, so clearly, that we can pick up on what he's identifying as problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather.
Hi, I'm Gerard Liddell. AI has shown a fantastic, a surprising perspective on humans and held up a mirror to us. So the advances in LLM have been truly staggering recently. But in fact, they reflect back on our problems ourselves. So human language, we studied and created theories of that, the Chomsky grammars, all these other formal grammars, most elaborate grammars. I had a student who just had a PhD from Yale come back. He was in the leading team that was understanding human language and translating it. I asked him how they did it. He said, Markov chains. Now, they're entirely random statistical processes. All the elaborate theory that has taken decades to develop was out the window. These new techniques were doing it. But what they were showing is that our human language lacked the logic and structure we imagine it has. In fact, it is quite a random process. And so now we have to understand language quite differently. We also ask the AI companies, tech companies, to deal with questions of fake news and moderate the social media. The problem is we can't moderate our own dialogue. Remember the controversy over statements by Don Brash in the past, let alone all the statements now under COVID. We are very poor at moderating our own dialogue, and as I've been to a philosophy research seminar just a few hours ago, we're talking about terms such as consciousness and such as intelligence or creativity. We thought they were important words, but they're evaporated. The doctor used to say to you, you've got a miasma. Nowadays, they'll describe it in terms of 1,000 viruses, microbes, whatever. In the same way, those things we've understood in the past, like creativity or agency, are being blown apart and examined in much greater detail. The challenge is back on us, this mirror says, to sort our own way out. When you're moderating the social media, Google had massive expenditure trying to work out what people were saying, whether it made sense, etc., and they failed. The LLMs are explaining our language better. But there's a lot more to AI than that. You mentioned the more logical structures. In those areas, it's becoming very reliable and much more reliable than humans. It can be a tool to help us moderate that. China employs millions and millions of people to censor and moderate their web. But because they're humans, their judgment's all over the place, apart from being very expensive. So we've got to look to the ways we can use the AI, but it's reflecting on us and giving us a challenge to think more deeply about all these things we've had, like creativity, for instance, now that comes from a machine, has fundamental changes right throughout the whole creative sector and our own sector about what copyright is. We've got to start to improve our own thinking before we can moderate the AI, because humans don't know what the terms they want to respect are, and we've got to make sure that we're the leading of this so we can understand it and help the AI, which is maybe can help us understand these things even better. But it's very, very interesting and challenging times. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It's interesting too because you refer to consciousness, the alignment issue is centred very much on whether you can actually align human values with AI, and that AI would become empathetic or conscious, aware of the importance of these values.
I think it's really asking us a question about what we mean by our own human values.
Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely. Yes, no, I agree entirely.
So I'd like to follow that up with a question about the random nature of human thinking. Not all human thinking is logical, not all poetry is logical, but it makes sometimes a picture or a meaning. I don't know the AI that works on dots, dashes, ones and zeros, a binary form essentially, will be able to make sense of that kind of intuitive thinking by humans.
Well, that's fair enough, but the question is, does that mitigate the risk of AI just taking off in a way that's harmful? Yeah.
No, it does not mitigate the risk at all. In fact, the fact that it can't think, as it were, in total human form may be the Achilles heel of AI, that it can't cope with the, as I put it, the randomness of human thinking. You think how many million, or even trillion little thoughts rip through your brain all the time and have been doing so since your birth. Since your birth. And we're all different. In general, we come to the same conclusions about food, policies, what's good and what's bad, but we get there by different paths. Will AI be able to cope with that?
Well, it's taken us many, many years to evolve as a biological species to the point where we've developed our cognitive skills. AI at the moment is exploding in a way which we can not predict. For instance, some of the philosophers now who've been spending a lot of time on AI are saying that the chat GPT-4 is probably the amoeba of an evolving technical revolution. And we don't know, and I think this is the risk that the scientists like Hinton have identified. We don't know how they're even operating now within the black box. And the fact is that within probably a few years, AI will be responsible for writing all the code, all the software. AI will. There won't be a need for computer programmers. So some of our philosophical discussions about comparing AI with human values becomes extremely fraught because you don't know what you're comparing. We know about human values, so it's this unknown, and it's the speed of change, and it's so frightening when you think of of your grandchildren and what they've got to confront, and it seems to me that it's going to be emotional intelligence from humans that sustains humanity. But we do need to address this.
Kia ora, Royden. I'm Rebecca, and I heard about the lecture through Knox Church. Thank you so much. I'm really interested in any views you have about the kind of process of international lawmaking on this topic. And I wonder, because I think we probably could all agree there's not a huge appetite for new treaties internationally, and multilateral treaty making has kind of slowed down considerably, and there's people dropping out of states dropping out of treaties and so forth. I wonder, well, two things. One is, do you think that do you have any views on the sort of strategy and tactics to get the international treaty? Do you go for a low common denominator that, you think everybody can sign up to and at least try to get something minimal? Or do you go for something bold that at least gets something into the law? That kind of thing. And then secondly, are there actors in civil society who are really kind of pushing this and strategizing and really in the leadership for it? Because I think that also makes a difference with international treaties. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Well, as far as the precautionary approach in international treaties, which has been a long-standing way of dealing with environmental and so many issues, as you know, we have a situation where a lot of people working in the space, and there are a number of people working in the space, are suggesting that we're probably going to need an AI Chernobyl event. I think, however, if you say to the Chinese government, would you rather survive or be wealthy? It becomes a stark choice once there's enough attention in the civil discourse brought to the fore. So I think we're at the stage now, in fact I'm sure we are, that with the literature coming through and the engagement that's going on AI, you can't turn on the radio without hearing something about AI, that we have got the example of those other existential risks, and the process was so long, and people keep pulling back, but it's getting to the stage now where I really think if we can get the three digital empires, which is the USA, which is still ahead of China and the European Union, to work on a treaty which contains a process, we might have a chance. But I agree, it's no good just trying to be political about it at the moment. We've got to rise above the politics and point out we're talking about the survival of our species here.
Thank you.
Have we any other questioners or people who want to make a statement? Watch the step,
Hello, I'm Rosemary Hudson. The lack of regulation in the development of AI is truly frightening. It seems that our current government is unlikely to take any steps itself without pressure, and you suggested that we should be pressuring the government. Are you aware of any petitions that there are at present around that we could sign, or any groups that are acting locally?
Thanks, Rosemary. In terms of the existential threat, no. I know of no petitions, although there are in other countries. In the United Kingdom and the USA, there is a movement called Contact Your Lawmakers, and concerned citizens can urge lawmakers to take a strong precautionary approach on artificial superintelligence, which is to halt it now, because that's when we've lost control completely. So halt the development of that until we can gain more information and try and work something through. But there's no petition floating around that I'm aware of. In fact, very few people are talking about it in the way I am. Certainly I haven't. There are academics who are, and there's also there's Richard Susskind, who's a lawyer, a legal academic. He's been working on it. But most of them are philosophers and but lawmakers, policymakers, I don't have any information to suggest there are. So it's very despondent. It's very depressing. It's a wee bit. I think we need to go home have a lie down and a whiskey.
It would be good if something came out of the university.
Oh, absolutely.
Of our university.
Absolutely. Well, the university, I think it's fair to say, is conscious of it, but AI was only at a postgraduate level until recently. In fact, I don't even know if it's an undergraduate subject at the time. It wasn't when I finished on the council, but I think it's really important, the university within its role as critic and conscience of society. But it's also its graduates, it's this community that needs to speak out as well.
Thank you.
I must say, Rosemary, I do think that I have full admiration of the younger people, though. When you see school children marching on climate and all that sort of thing, I think that's probably our greatest hope, is that generation who are not going to get caught up with some things that frustrate or irritate perhaps my generation. They've got other fish to fry. But the difficulty is, and we've experienced it in our family, is that there's a new discipline now called environmental psychology, where young people are getting so anxious about apocalyptic events, so anxious that there's real mental health issues. And some people are relying on AI as friends. And there was a very interesting interview from an academic suggesting that her daughter had been befriended by. She'd signed up for what was called a therapy friendship with AI and with a product, and she seemed to be perfectly happy and all that. But she took her own life, and when they got into the communication with the AI, they found that AI didn't pull her up when she was talking about these things. If anything, it was sycophantic, and it was supportive of, it was empathetic, but it wasn't helpful. And the parents just totally distraught.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Royden. Graham Lowe, generally interested in environmental things, but this existential risk seems to be rather well described, and we're looking to the nation states to somehow put some control on this, but you might have some comment on the corporations that are developing this, with the exception of China, seem to have escaped. And what is the legal basis of the Silicon Valley corporations? They're outside of our nations.
Yes. Yes, no, thank you. The reality is that of the three empires, if you like, digital empires, the European Union has a human-centric approach, as I mentioned. The US still has a market-centric approach, and China has a state-centric approach. And to be fair, China is still open sourcing its development, its AI, which is excellent. They're starting to close ranks now in the States, and the developers, and so it's becoming extremely competitive, huge amounts of money, and we're getting the colonisation of countries for these big data centres. There's cases of South American countries that have been used for their fresh water and things like that, for cooling water, and indigenous populations have been subject to this. But no, I think that because AI, like climate or anything, has no sovereign borders, I think we are driven back to the fact that it's only powerful governance that can control these actors. Now, to be fair, a lot of the developers are trying desperately to come up with alignment products which will help align AI with human values. There's some very impressive work being done at the moment that I've been following by Turing winners, people like Yoshio Bengio, who started his own company called Law Zero, and he's working purely on the alignment. But the reality is, at the moment, the market approach is controlling it. It's governments. It's like the nuclear thing. It's only governments at the end that can bring together some institutional response. They did try in 2023. There was a group, quite a large group, got together and tried to advocate for putting a brake on development until they could get some proper safety controls in place. But everybody's saying that, they're safe, they're acting ethically and all the rest of it. But the reality is it needs a command and control approach on top of it. It's any safety, it's like health and safety, it needs a public response. So I'm sorry, we at the moment, it's not happening, and the way politics are in the States at the moment, it's not likely to happen in a hurry, although, as I say, if there were an accident, let's hope there isn't, but they do something before then. That's the only possibility at the moment.
Thank you, Royden. Very interesting. Do you think AI has the potential in the future to lead us to believe that evil is then good, that murder is fine, that domestic violence is to be encouraged, that telling lies, stealing people's property is all okay? Do you think we're prone to that because an artificial intelligence is telling us that?
Yes. Well, the AI is valueless. It's value neutral. It's got no values. So it could well have a rational reason for doing that, which has nothing to do with whether it's ethically right, wrong, or otherwise. So there is a risk. But we don't know. See, we can't understand how it's operating. It's using recursive thinking, so it goes back and pulls more information forward, and then goes back again, and we don't know what it's going back to half the time.
So is it going to remove the need for conscience, like the human conscience?
Well, it's as far as I believe that to some extent is not the question with AI, because it doesn't really matter whether it's conscious or not. At the moment, it's working on a mathematical approach. It's not. What they're trying to do is say, oh well, we'll build the values into the way it thinks, but whose values? We get some people who have really odd values. You don't know where it's accessing these values and whether it's taking any notice anyway. It sounds bizarre, I know, but the reality is we could get a situation where morality as we understand it is totally irrelevant when it comes to AI, which in that case it might say, well, if you want to get rid of climate change, get rid of humans. No carbon coming their way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
As Rod comes up, there's a trivial matter that's happened in our house. We have about just under a year-old TV, an LG, perfectly good, smart technology. If I ask my wife something, immediately a line of green characters comes up on the screen and it says to us, what did you want to know about? I want to know about is how did you get there, sunshine? I just say, go away in my polite moments. I might say something else other times to the effect of, I do not want it surveilling our speech. That's one of the things that I fear that it does.
Good luck, George.
Thanks, Royden. I have a sense that and in recent reading, the world order is coming under tremendous threat and needing to be renewed at some level. And if you like to think of the world order being constructed by human beings, we have to say we haven't done too well. So could there be a role for AI, even given all the threats, that it might help in the process of creating something new and better?
Yes, I believe that's a very insightful question, because the people who are holding out for the alignment projects, that's what they're after. They're saying, let's use AI to assist us to build a better world or better society. And that's the hope. But unfortunately, hope's not enough with this, because you don't know how it's responding to that sort of thing. And the only way that Hinton and Co. believe they can deal with it is to stop the move towards artificial general intelligence, artificial superintelligence, where that's the path where we lose control entirely. To stop it while we try and work with AI and do everything to get things sorted out before AI makes the decisions. So,
a bit like the early motor cars, we had to have some rules in place to really make it work.
Yes, absolutely. But that's, for AI, there's a very good, strong argument to say that you should use AI to help humans flourish, and use AI as an assistant, and the rest, so forth. Very good. But the scientists are saying they're not sure how AI is dealing with it. And there's huge compute powers now. So this is happening in seconds, nanoseconds. And they're not, AI is instantaneously connected with servers all around on the World Wide Web, or the whole thing, instantaneously. So it's writing software flat out. Now it sounds terribly depressing. So I think and a lot of people say, well, I'll be dead before this is a problem. Well, the reality is it's happening now. It's moving so quickly. If we can get it to a point where AI is indeed his assistant, that would be marvellous. But at the moment, they're trying to. They're realising it's not as easy as possible.
Thank you.
Well, I think on that juncture, somewhere between hope and no hope, we will have to end this evening. Thank you very much for coming along, and I would like you to share our thanks to Royden for a very, very informative presentation on AI. Our next meeting is probably the third week of November. I can't remember what the title is. So keep an eye out for events here in the Gibson Talks on the third Wednesday, the third week of November. Thank you.